I think it's clever. I think the Russians will resist that redeployment for as long as they possibly can. But if the Ukrainians can solidify their position in the Kursk Oblast, then eventually Putin will be forced to respond, and that will get them the relief in the Donbas that they hope for. And I think it will remind people on both sides of the Atlantic that the Ukrainians are hard as nails, and they will keep going, and they are capable if we give them the resource. I think all round very clever play by Zelensky and his team.
What have you made of what Ukraine have done in the Kursk region?
It's clever and necessary. I think the highly attritional, sort of grinding nature of the front in the Donbas means that there was no opportunity, and hasn't been for a year or more, to make any quick impact there. And the Ukrainians will have an eye on the election in the United States and changing politics in the French Parliament, worsening politics in Germany, and a change in politics here, albeit I think they were always pretty clear that the new government would be quite similar to the old government in terms of its approach to Ukraine. So I think that they had in mind a need to rally the donor community, whilst there's a military effect they were seeking as well, which is to achieve some relief on the front in the Donbas by hoping to force a redeployment of Russian troops away from the Donbas and into the Kursk region in order to counter this offensive. I think it's clever. I think the Russians will resist that redeployment for as long as they possibly can. But if the Ukrainians can solidify their position in the Kursk Oblast, then eventually Putin will be forced to respond, and that will get them the relief in the Donbas that they hope for. And I think it will remind people on both sides of the Atlantic that the Ukrainians are hard as nails, and they will keep going, and they are capable if we give them the resource. I think all round very clever play by Zelensky and his team.
But do you have any hesitation as it appears that some nations may have this may be how it works out, that there is some lack of appetite actually to full-bloodedly support Ukraine going into Russian territory, doing the thing that they've said, they spent the last 2 years rightly saying Russia should not have done to them?
Look, if you were interviewing me as the Minister for the Armed Forces, I wouldn't have been able to give you the previous answer. I'd have had to have given you something much more calibrated.
Yeah.
But now that I'm freed of those public responsibilities, I can tell you what I think. But of course, no Western government can cheer on Zelensky invading Russia. That would be nuts.
And yet you think you said you think it's clever.
I do. And so will everybody behind the scenes in the UK MOD, the US DOD, French MOD, and everywhere else. Everybody will see the military logic in what Zelensky is doing.
Well, it's interesting, because you talk about the military.
The way that Putin and his machine works is all they need is someone like me to speak to you as a minister and say, it's absolutely right that Ukraine has done this in the Kursk Oblast. And that will then get replayed on Russian television as proof that NATO are behind the invasion of Russia.
Of course. It might be clever, but is it provocative? Actually, is it dangerous because of what will come in retaliation?
Look, I think Russia relies on its ability to deter Ukraine and its Western donors out of fear of retaliation and escalation all the time. What confounded Putin and those around him in the early months of the war was the fact that the West achieved escalation dominance through its support of Ukraine. So yes, exactly to the point I was just making, yes, the West must always be cautious about giving Putin the excuse for escalation. But we mustn't be deterred by them being so quick to threaten escalation every time that the Ukrainians do something that is a perfectly legitimate act of war.
Okay. Let's turn to the situation between Israel and Iran. Is it inevitable, really, that Iran will retaliate? And how much of a difference do you think, if at all, it makes with Keir Starmer phoning the leader of Iran and saying, please do not retaliate?
Well, I think in those circumstances, there is no harm at all in having the conversation. So I don't think that the Prime Minister has done anything wrong in speaking to the President of Iran. My sense is, and funny enough, in prepping to come on and speak to you this morning, I saw on the Al Arabiya Twitter feed that the Iranian Ministry for Foreign Affairs have kind of rubbished the European US statements of yesterday. My sense is that Iran will be unable not to respond, just the way that the Iranian kind of system works when their blood is up. I think that they will. The question is the complexity of the response that they give. Will they give a relatively straightforward response to, in their view, satisfy their honor, but something that they would fully expect the Israelis and their allies to be able to defeat? Or are they going to try and do something with sufficient complexity that some of the missiles may get through? If the latter turns out to be the case, I think it'll be incredibly dangerous. And I think we will be on a very rapid escalation trajectory. And it concerns me enormously.